Hi everybody, welcome back to IB Math. We are going to continue with our trigonometric identities and equations chapter 9, and today we're continuing with section 9C, which has been our trigonometric identities. And in this video we're focusing on part 2 of section C, which is the Pythagorean identity. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit in the C1 video, but one of the most important identities in trig is the Pythagorean identity, where we know, because of how we built the unit circle, that sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1, right? And this is if we look at the sine value and the cosine value and square each one, we know it's going to be equal to 1. That's the Pythagorean theorem. That's how we build all of the sine and cosine values around the unit circle. And as a result of that, if I were to subtract one or the other to the other side, I'm going to get sine squared theta equals 1 minus cosine squared, right, if I subtract the cosine squared over, or cosine squared equals 1 minus sine squared if I subtracted the sine squared over. And those are the two basic versions or variations of the Pythagorean identity that we have, that we're going to be using for simplifying expressions. So I want to do a couple examples here. This first one, I have 2 minus 2 sine squared theta. And I want to rewrite this, maybe combine it as a single term. So how would I do that? Well, let's see. First of all, if there's something I can factor out. I can factor out a 2, right? And I factor out a 2, and that's going to leave me with 1 minus cosine squared theta, right? And I have 1 minus cosine squared theta, or sorry, 1 minus sine squared theta. I'm getting ahead of myself. 1 minus sine squared theta, right? If I factor out just the 2. And looking at this, I've got this 1 minus sine squared theta. And what does 1 minus sine squared theta simplify to? Well, it simplifies to cosine squared theta, based on that Pythagorean identity that we just saw up top there. 1 minus sine squared is equal to cosine squared. And that's it. So this simplifies down to one term as 2 cosine squared theta. Likewise, I've got another term. I've got cosine squared theta times sine theta plus sine cubed theta. So again, based on this, is there something I can factor out? Well, I can factor out a sine theta, right? And if I factor out a sine theta, then what am I going to be left with? I'm going to be left with cosine squared theta plus, and if I factored out a sine, this is going to be sine squared theta, right? Well, what do I know? Cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta is equal to? Well, it's just equal to 1. So as a result, this just simplifies down to sine theta. So in both cases, I took an expression with multiple terms and I simplified it down to a single term based on some of the Pythagorean identities that I know. There's the actual answers printed out. Let's try another one. I've got this cosine theta minus sine theta quantity squared. So it says expand and simplify. So let's go ahead and multiply that out. So we know that cosine theta minus sine theta quantity squared, well, that means this, right? It means cosine theta minus sine theta times cosine theta, theta minus sine theta, right? That's what that squared means. And now it can FOIL, right? So if I FOIL, what am I going to get? First, inner, outer, last. So cosine theta times cosine theta is cosine squared theta. And I'm going to get minus sine theta cosine theta. And then minus another sine theta cosine theta, right? And then a negative sign times negative sign is going to be positive sine squared theta, right? And that's using first, outer, inner, last. And I'm going to combine those middle two terms, right? So I get cosine squared theta minus 2 sine theta cosine theta plus sine squared theta. Now, there's a couple of things that you can look at here, maybe try to split things up, but let's go back to that last example. What do I know about this sine squared theta and this cosine squared theta? Well, that equals 1, right? So can I just combine that to 1 and then minus 2 sine theta cosine theta, right? Because I took the sine squared theta and the cosine squared theta, I add those together, that's going to equal just 1. So this simplifies down to 1 minus 2 sine theta cosine theta, and that's it. Can't simplify it anymore. Here's the answer here. Now they wrote cosine theta, sine theta, but it's basically the same idea, right? That's it for section 9C2. So I put down here 7 problems that I want you to look at in section 9C2. If you could do those, please make sure that you submit those on the assignment for section 9C2, and don't forget to check in this week. And if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to ask them on the discussion boards or email me if you get stuck on something, and make sure you turn in the assignment. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.